Good evening. It's your boy E Money. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share it, add me on the platforms, alright? Just do what you gotta do. Donate. We accept donations graciously. Donate to the channel. It does help. Join the conversation. You already know what's up. I hope everybody's doing fine.
A.D. Vance, the vice presidential nominee.
Tucker Carlson. Hang on. Just make your way in. Cop a squat. Say hello. Ask me anything. I got a few things I want to watch. I haven't decided what I want to watch first. But we'll get into it shortly. It's 8 p.m. on a Friday night. Do you know where your kids are? Are they in bed? They probably should be. Oh, my back. Chat, I'm having back problems. I'm getting old. What do you say to that? Ooh.
Is confirmed for a live tour stop in Hershey, Pennsylvania next month.
Make sure you leave comments. Let me know your thoughts.
We hope to see you there. We'll be in cities all across the country starting next week. But first, our interview with Bobby Kennedy Jr., his first since endorsing Donald Trump on Friday. Here it is.
From RFK. He officially dropped out of the race. And he openly endorsed Trump.
So people were shocked. I know a lot of people you know well were shocked when you endorsed Trump. I was not shocked because for all the areas where you disagree on specific issues, there's a consistent theme that I've noticed in both of your lives, which is you've both spent the majority of your life, well, in your case, your whole life, in the American ruling class, and both of you decided that it was corrupt and that you were going to say so out loud at great risk to both of you. And so it was probably just a matter of time before you aligned in some way. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a bunch of realignments, political realignments, about 4 or 5 throughout American history. And I think we're going through one right now with the Democratic Party and with both political parties really changing in this very dramatic way. And you and I talked earlier about the transformation of the Republican Party into the party of environmentalism.
Yes.
And, where the Democratic Party has one environmental issue, which is this carbon orthodoxy. which ends up
Chad, what is
benefiting
carbon
the oil
orthodoxy?
companies and BlackRock and
Hmm?
Goldman Sachs with
Google that.
offshore wind and carbon capture, $100 billion carbon capture projects, which is part of just the strip mining of the middle class. And it's the only issue you can talk about in the Democratic Party. I got into the environmental movement to do habitat protection, to do wildlife conservation,
Exactly.
to get toxics out of our kids.
Amen.
And none of these are issues that that the party itself, Democrats care about them, but the party itself doesn't. But there's been these big, profound realignments, and it's not only on that issue. It's really the domination of this corrupt merger of state and corporate power that is happening in Washington, D.C. now, where our democracy has really been subverted by the industries that have taken over the regulatory agencies, and they become and transformed them into sock puppets or corporate profit taking. And basically wholly owned subsidiaries of the industries they're supposed to regulate.
The word is we are owned. We are all numbers.
And the Democrats, for a variety of reasons, and I watched it happen over many, many years.
You think you're not? You're a fool.
Have
Wake the
clung
fuck up.
to this illusion of these democratic institutions that they're still democratic, and they have a belief. We all have the capacity to judge ourselves on our intentions rather than our actions, right? And
I've been there.
so, and the Democratic Party judges itself. It sees itself. My friends who are Democrats see themselves as part of the good guys.
I think if I was like into politics, I think I'm a Republican.
They're like the good guys who are in Fort Apache, surrounded by the forces of barbarism that are about to storm the gate, and they're the only ones. The only way to keep it at bay is to elect a president who has dementia. And because you're voting for the apparatus,
Yes,
and you're not voting for, or another then to handpick a presidential candidate without any elections, to basically get rid of democracy in order to save it, and handpick a candidate who in 40 days now has not.
What are your thoughts? Do you think we're on the brink of like having democracy just crumble as a whole?
Given a single interview on any media outlet. And I think about when my uncle and father would think about that, they prided.
Also, what are your thoughts on like just media in general? What do you think it looks like in the future? Do you see media like progressing into something much, much worse, or just evaporating completely?
Themselves on being able to go on debate. It was the centerpiece, the whole, function of democracy was to anneal ideas in the furnace of debate and have them rise up in, the marketplace of ideas. And to the idea that, and we had this British tradition of Churchill and the others in the House of Commons, and being able to defend their policies and being forced to defend their policy.
Seems like there's just a lot of rampant cheating, just in general.
Yes. Articulately eloquent.
Things aren't being earned the old-fashioned way anymore.
And, my uncle and father just thought we should.
Call me
ideas
old-fashioned.
are important, and we should be able to defend them. And if you can't defend them, there's something wrong with you.
yes.
And why? So we have a presidential candidate that was selected by the Democratic Party who can't do that. And one of the things that my uncle and father were always thinking about is how do we look to the rest of the world, right? They were conscious that America was the template for democracy. When we created modern democracy in 1789 or 1791, when the Bill of Rights was ratified, we were the only democracy on earth. By 1865, during the end of the Civil War, there were 5, and they were all modeled on America. And by the time my uncle took office, there was about 150, and by the end of the 60s, there's 190. They're all based on the American model. And, we very much were the exemplary nation. We were the example of democracy around the globe, and they were very conscious. They were embarrassed
lost that.
first by the civil rights movement.
We need to get that
Because
back,
they said,
though.
what is the rest of the world going to think about
We
it?
need that back now more than
And then
ever.
they realized, well, we better correct, the problem.
Yeah.
Because, but everything that they did, they were conscious that they were being watched. Well, what is the rest of the world think of American democracy right now? That, that we have in one party selected a man with dementia to lead the free world, and then turned around and picked a woman who cannot give an interview. She cannot defend her vision or America's record in the world. And then she gave this, Vice President Harris gave this speech at the convention that was written by neocons. And they had CIA directors talking at the Democratic Convention, military people talking at the Democratic Convention. My father and my uncle were the party of anti-war. My uncle was asked by his best friend, Ben Bradley, one of his two best friends who ran the Washington Post, what do you want on your gravestone, your epitaph? And my uncle said immediately he kept the peace. He said the primary job of a president of the United States was to keep the country out of war. He said he didn't want children in Africa and Latin America and Asia, when they heard about the United States of America, to think of a man with a gun. They wanted them to think of a Peace Corps volunteer and the Alliance for Progress and USAID, which were programs that he created to build the middle class, to end run the oligarchs, end run the military juntas that used to receive U.S. aid, and instead go directly to the poor and build institutions, education and health and
Yeah, that all
the
sounds
institutions
good
of democracy
when you've
to
been practicing
continue to
talking
live
like
for
this
the
for
rest of
so
the world
long.
and live
But
up to what we were supposed to be doing, which is to encourage the growth of
none of them follow through.
democratic rule. So
Things don't
now
get better. Things have just gotten
you
worse.
have
They've
we have
all
a
talked
system
right.
that's
They've all
produced
talked the big talk, but nothing's really
people
changed.
who,
Nothing's changed at all.
candidate in
Things
the
have changed
Democratic
for the
Party
worse.
who can't even defend America's record in the world, and who is parroting this kind of warmongering, military domination ideology that's gotten us in such trouble. It's caused a calamity in our country. It's gutted the middle class. It's made us a pariah around the globe. It led to the rise of BRICS. It's leading to the rise of totalitarianism all over the world. And, I'd say this finally, that if you really look at what's happening in the Democratic Party today, it's a party that the word demos in Greek means people. But it's a party that's lost faith in the people. It's a party that needs ironclad control. So they didn't trust anybody to have a real election. They got rid of the primaries because they didn't trust the people. They then handpicked Vice President Harris with no election, no even pretense of election, because they didn't trust the people. And they're the party now of censorship. And
how can you have a democracy with censorship?
You cannot have a democracy. They're absolutely incompatible. And everybody knew that. Everybody, you and I were raised reading Orwell and Aldous Huxley and Robert Heinlein and Alexander Solzhenitsyn and all of these other books that were part of classical literature that was taught in every American classroom. It said the first step to totalitarianism is always, because with censorship, it's the first step down that slippery slope. And there's no time that we look back in history and say the people who were censoring speech were the good guys. They're always the bad guys, because we know that they're the guys who are going to end up cracking the whip on us all and being our overlords. And then the whole thing about
my overlord.
Like you and I talked about that
ain't happening, cuz
clip of Tim Walz, Governor Walz, saying that government should be the ultimate arbiter of what is protected speech and what is not. You know, he said if something that the First Amendment does not protect, misinformation and disinformation, but it does. The First Amendment was written to protect not only true speech but false speech, and speech that it wasn't there and it's unnecessary to protect the kind of speech that everybody wants to hear. It's there to protect the kind of speech that nobody wants to hear.
Right. And especially speech that is critical of the people in charge.
Exactly.
And so in their current formulation, misinformation is defined as any speech that criticizes the job that they're doing. So with that in mind, you see the Biden administration encouraging Macron, to arrest the owner and founder of Telegram, Pavel Durov, who's now, as of right now, in a French prison. That seems like
I need to look that up.
That's the hallmark of dictatorship. It sounds to me.
News. I think it is big news, but I'm not sure who this
we've
guy
lost
is.
Europe. Europe is
Pavel
that
Durov
does not have free speech. You know, look what's happened to Elon Musk. And here, Elon Musk should be the hero of the Democratic Party. Of the old Democratic Party, he wouldn't be the hero. Somehow he became a villain because he was actually the only platform that would allow free speech on his platform. And he's now become a villain because of it, because the Democratic Party does not believe in the people. If you don't believe in free speech, it means because you don't trust the people. You don't trust them to figure it out on their own, you know,
I think we're all a bunch of fucking idiots.
Information on which they can base their ideas and their notions, their beliefs,
a dramatic
and their votes,
on
and that the
entire
government has to protect them from dangerous information, from things that might put bad ideas into their heads. And it's very patronizing, but it's also very manipulative and conniving, and really it's exactly the opposite of democracy. And you will not find a single Democrat who will criticize it. It's really astonishing to me because the Democrats always like to, you know, when I endorsed Trump, the kind of the fulcrum of the centerpiece of the text of hatred that I got back, this kind of seething anger so many Democrats was, well, look what he did on January 6th. Okay, January 6th was a bad day in American history. And what President Trump did there, in my view, was very bad. It was reprehensible. But was the Republic really at risk? You know, we have the U.S. military, we have the National Guard, they have all the institutions, we have Congress, we have all these institutions of government, and there was a mob of people, most of whom who probably didn't know what was happening. Some of them were very badly intentioned and were breaking the law. But it wasn't a threat to the Republic. What is a threat, and this is what you cannot explain to a Democrat now, and it's astonishing to me. What is a threat is when the government is censoring your speech, political speech. And, you know, I just won Tucker last week.
But that was the centerpiece of Democratic ideology.
If he says something about another lawsuit.
I mean, the word liberal means free speech. That's where it comes from. Oh,
that must be weird for you, being named Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and spending your entire life in this world. Like, what's that like? Let me just say this. I won a lawsuit. I won a new judgment in my lawsuit, Kennedy versus Biden, last week. And Kennedy versus Biden was part of two lawsuits that were brought, one by the attorney generals of Missouri and Louisiana, and the other by me, for the same issues, which was the Biden administration's censorship of speech. And so there's a series of decisions. There's a 155-page decision. The attorney general's case went up to the Supreme Court and was rejected because the Supreme Court found that those attorney generals didn't have standing to sue because they weren't directly harmed. My case this week, the federal judge Doty said Kennedy does have standing to sue. And he reissued his injunction against the Biden administration. So I have an injunction right now against the
Biden White House.
Haven't the Bidens like gotten in like aren't they in shouldn't they be in trouble for like stealing all kinds of money and making deals and stuff like that? Am I tripping? Like the dad and the son, like didn't they both like accept like bribes or something? Allegedly? Allegedly. Something like that.
And join them from censoring me, which they've been doing. The 155-page decision by Judge Doty details everything that happened. 37 hours after he took the oath of office, President Biden's White House opened up a portal for the FBI to begin to have access to social media posts on all the different social media sites. And the FBI then invited in the CIA, DHS, the IRS, and CISA. CISA is this new agency that is the center of the censorship industrial complex that is in charge of making sure Americans don't hear things that their government doesn't want them to hear. And those agencies and other agencies, including the health agencies like CDC, were given access to go into the social media sites and change posts and slow walk things and shadow ban posts. That it was part of that effort. They removed my Instagram account. I had almost 1 million followers. They say it was for misinformation, but they could not point to a single post that I ever made that was factually erroneous. And they actually, Facebook pushed back in the email chain. You can see Facebook pushing back at the White House and saying, well, wait a minute, he's not, this isn't misinformation. This is not factually erroneous. What they're saying is actually true. And they had to invent a new word, which is called malinformation, which is information that is factually true, but nevertheless inconvenient for the government. And that became disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. That's what that is. So everybody, and
isn't that that's illegal?
Yeah, and the emails show that Facebook, the people said they were saying about the White House in their private emails with each other. These people are cynical, terrible
I ain't
people.
trying to do nothing
And
to
they
get
knew what
canceled.
they were doing was breaking the law.
Do not cancel
But they
me.
were under tremendous pressure. I mean, Facebook has all these deals with the government, and as do all
I
the
don't
media
want the
companies
smoke,
with the
okay?
intelligence agencies and elsewhere. Plus,
Just let me be.
they were the White House was
Hey.
overtly telling them that they were going to, if they didn't comply, that their Section
Hello.
230 immunity was in jeopardy. So
Welcome.
Section 230 immunity is,
Welcome.
just so that your listeners know what it is. I used to write for the New York Times regularly. Every time I wrote an article, lawyers would call me and fact check everything in that article. Because if I wrote something that was
Hello,
defamatory in that
Brandy.
article, and somebody was
What do you think
defamed,
you're doing,
that person
Brandy?
would sue me, but they
Huh?
could also sue the New York Times. So the social media site said, we cannot hire lawyers to look at every post and call the people and check on it on Facebook or Instagram. So
Don't
if
forget
this
to hit that
industry is
like
gonna
button.
function, we need to be able to not be liable for what is
Are you?
published on our site. And that is called Section 230 of the Communications Act.
I don't know how I feel about
Congress
that.
said if you are just a platform, a mere platform that for other people to publish, like Facebook is, like Instagram, like Twitter or X.
Well, I mean, since you're here,
immune. Nobody
hit the
can
thumbs
sue you.
up.
They can sue the person who wrote the post, but they can't
Do
sue Facebook. So
And don't forget
Mark
to
Zuckerberg said,
get
if they
out to
take
vote
away
this
our
year.
Facebook,
It's
our
important.
Section 230 immunity, it is existential, meaning we will no longer exist. And so they were terrified because Congress was actually considering removing
He's talking
Section
about the
230
end of
immunity, and the White
democracy.
House was telling them, if you don't
It's not
censor
good.
our political critics, we're going to take away your Section 230 immunity. If President Trump did that, the Democrats would go berserk.
Well, it's criminal behavior. Anyone who does that is a criminal.
Right? They're violating the First Amendment, the Constitution
this
for
is called
starters.
logic.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. And
when you break the law, you get punished for
is
it.
that if somebody does something bad, it shouldn't matter.
Doesn't matter who you are. Yeah, I agree with that. It doesn't matter
we should all
what
be going
party
after
you
them, and
are.
we should be going
You
after them
get
as a
punished.
society.
How much does it cost you to use the internet?
Too much. Too much, Brandywine. Too much. Oh,
A lot about that.
I bet.
And it's about tribalism. That people put themselves in these tribal categories, and we're hardwired for tribalism. That's why orthodoxies are so popular. That people.
tribalism, like when the pandemic occurred, people were put into the position where they had to be in lockdown, so they stopped being able to associate with people and congregate, and people as a species, we are social creatures, and the pandemic did a lot of damage to us as a species. Just think about that. What am I watching? I'm watching Tucker Carlson. He's interviewing RFK.
Well, get sucked into various kind of orthodoxies, whether it's ideological orthodoxies or religious orthodoxies. And that impulse is really, it's not a religious impulse. It's a biological
His voice
impulse.
is all messed up, but it's
that's
like
hardwired in us.
it's
from
something
the
neurological,
20,000
something
generations we
with his
spent
brain.
wandering the African savannah in tiny little groups that were warring each other, where there was always a male leader. Where the women were traded as chattels because you couldn't marry your sister, so you knew from the beginning she was going to be a trade good, and you were going to trade her for somebody else. She had no power, and where you all had to ascribe to an orthodoxy and see no problems with people who were within your in group. And people who were outside were subhuman, and they could be killed. And if they made a mistake, you wanted to talk about it. Everybody would talk
Is
about
it the
it.
guys that be sitting behind
We're all
desks when he's
hardwired that
interviewing
way,
people?
because that's where our wiring.
Don't
comes
they
from.
all?
And when somebody gets subsumed in orthodoxy,
They all sit behind
it's
desks.
very, very difficult to unravel. And there are all kinds of
You have to be more
psychiatric
specific.
treatises about how do you deprogram somebody. How do you talk somebody out of an orthodoxy?
Are they sitting at a table? Yes.
The little that I know about it is that if you challenge them directly,
They're sitting at a round, or maybe
it
perhaps a round wooden
and
table
it makes them
right
less
across from each other.
able to move off that, or they get very defensive. And that, the way to approach them, there are ways to approach them. There's deprogramming protocols, and they usually include a lot of Socratic method of asking them questions about
Socratic method.
but it's a one-on-one.
I believe most of,
It's a one-on-one project enterprise.
maybe sometimes they're on a couch or something, or in chairs, but most of the time they're at like some type of podium or like some type of table or desk type
because it's really
setup.
destroying our country. But it's a one-on-one. It's a one-on-one project enterprise, and it's not
This is
something that
Tucker
you can do with the
Carlson.
whole Democratic Party overnight. Something has to happen that's going to make this, this tribal thinking unravel,
The
because it's really
podcast
destroying
is
our
Tucker
country.
Carlson.
And the polarization which is happening on both
He's
sides
interviewing Robert F. Kennedy
is
Jr.
Is put on steroids by these
He's
social
one of the
media
Kennedy
algorithms
family.
that reward people for staying on the site as long as possible. So the algorithm,
he was John
all the
F.
algorithm
Kennedy's
knows is I've
nephew.
got to keep as many eyeballs on the site as possible. It turns out that the way people stay on the site is if you fortify their existing opinions.
Of course.
If you feed them information that consolidates their worldview.
Yes.
And so, we have this problem now where it's not just polarization like the Civil War, but it's polarization on steroids, because you've got machines that are manipulating us to hate each other more every single day.
So knowing all this as you do and have for a long time, the most radical step you can make if you're a Democrat is endorsing Donald Trump. So there are political calculations involved, there are ideological calculations, but there are also, of course, personal calculations. So once you do that, you've burned your boats. Like, that's it. You're not going back to wherever you were 10 years ago.
If you were in politics, what would you be? Are you a Democrat?
It was an obvious decision for me.
Or a Republican?
It should have been, but it was a very, very difficult decision. And we had, I have a very, very good team around me. And
or are you a liberal?
I was most worried about my wife.
What's the difference between them all?
About Cheryl, who it was not comfortable with it.
Do you file
She's
exempt?
A lifelong Democrat. She's not the aristocracy. She comes from a very, I would say poor family in North Florida, but she found her way through idealism to the Democratic Party, and she shares a lot of those values. So and her industry is very, very much aligned with the Democratic Party, probably more than any industry in our country and more than any town in our country. So this, for me, was likely to have huge impacts on her. And ultimately, if she had told me, you can't do this, I wouldn't have done it. So, but I'm very grateful that she allowed me to do it. She was not embracing it, but she said, I understand why you have to do this. And we had a 4-day meeting up in Hyannisport in my home, where kind of everybody, my family members, my kids, many other people, Tony Robbins, attended remotely.
I think Trump is a Republican.
A number of other kind of spiritual leaders, just people who care deeply about our country.
So you're a Republican.
Chimed in and made case on both sides. People from the campaign organization.
So am I think.
But here was a calculus that ultimately was persuasive for me. All of our internal polling showed from the outset that if I had stayed in the Democratic Party, I was going to
there's
get
0 people in the chat.
Vice President Harris elected. 57 to 60%, and even more.
So
sometimes up to 66% of
delay.
my voters, so my followers, if I withdrew from the election, they were going to vote for Trump. Which is ironic, by the way, Tucker, because President Trump and the RNC did nothing to prevent me from being on the ballots. They didn't have a big major organization sending private eyes out.
Tucker's just kind of been
was interviewing literally everybody
quiet most of this time. Like John's been talking a lot.
I mean,
Robert,
got a
whatever.
call.
They've been doing that for, I know for a
face
fact,
you did.
for over a year. As you know.
Yeah, and they were open about it. This is
No,
what we're
there's
going to
1,
do.
not 0.
They
It says
put a person
0
in charge of it named
on
Liz
here.
Smith, who's that's the kind of person she is. This is what she does. She does negative research on people and tries to characterize
Liz
them.
Smith, Elliot Spitzer's old girlfriend.
You may see
Yes.
1, but I see 0.
And she was in charge of that team. And then there was other people as well. Mary Beth Cahill had been my uncle, Teddy's chief of staff, who I knew. Liz Smith was in charge of the negative research, what they call negative research, euphemistically. And I got calls from, for example, a guy that I met at an AA meeting 40 years ago.
Dinner was very, very good, by the way.
Most of my family members received calls on contacts, either text or telephone calls from people who
Very
said,
good.
I'm doing intelligence for the DNC, and, we'd like to talk to you about Robert Kennedy, and if you have any negative information about him. So I was getting that.
What could possibly be the justification for that?
Well, they didn't want me running, and that's the thing, is it's not democratic. It wasn't,
That's such a mafia tactic.
Yeah. So, but the point is, it was weird. It was not smart, because I was actually helping the Democrats, and if they just let me stay in and they didn't run this campaign up against me, they probably would win this election. And because I was hurting Trump, oddly, Trump didn't do anything about it. He was kind of, he made a couple of statements about me that I was a communist, etc. They were sort of
Trump called him a
good-natured,
communist.
the stuff that you,
You're
like,
no
okay,
more.
that's okay.
There ain't no. What you mean there ain't no
Calling
more?
My old girlfriend thing, what did he do? Or,
What you mean there ain't no more?
Whatever they were asking him. So,
Learn about crypto and get rewarded as you learn with Coinbase Learning Rewards. We've paid out over $100 million in crypto rewards.
I'm really excited to tell everyone how you can play anywhere and win everywhere in the city this year.
But the DNC was up to that, and
Were you shocked by that?
was I shocked? I don't know.
There's no more. Wait, thanks. Oh yeah, it was.
I feel like
There's
I'm
no more. You so full of shit.
I'm in a place now where nothing surprises me.
There better be more.
So, but I don't know. Anyway, so
They're gonna
I
drop.
feel
all
like
this
I
stuff
can
now,
hear you
like you said,
laughing.
right?
what? That they're going to get rid of Liz Smith and put her on some other project? I don't know.
You sort of wonder, how does Liz Smith live with herself? I mean, that's so repulsive.
I wonder if you got
how
like
she
this
justified that to
crazy
herself.
delay.
I have to. I've met her. She's not stupid. But that is disgusting. No, you've lived a life famously, and if you have a team of researchers digging into it,
And I have not led a careful life, by the way.
I know.
I said, my first during my announcement speech, I said, I told my wife, told Cheryl this a couple of days before. I said, I have so many skeletons in my closet that if they could vote, I could run for king of the world. I know stuff's going to come out about me because I let me put it, a colorful life.
Yeah.
And
Meanwhile, I gotta get
people have
blood
all kinds
sucked
of
out of my
stories about me,
body.
but so I'm
Potentially
ready
die.
for, I'm ready for, listen, I've never done anything criminal in terms of like
They gotta have some stew to come
stealing
home
money or
to.
self-enrichment. I did a lot of stupid stuff and a lot of,
Have you gotten rich off pointless foreign wars?
no, I have not done that yet.
Oh, you haven't. Okay, you haven't forced people to inject substances in their bodies. Okay,
No, I've never done any of that. But anyway, so it became clear to me that if Kamala got elected, the issues that I cared about, which is ending the foreign wars, the unjust wars, the immoral wars, the wars of
Forever
choice like
wars.
Ukraine, stopping the censorship, which I think is existential for our democracy, and then protecting children from this extraordinary, exploding chronic disease epidemic. Those are the three reasons that got me into the campaign. That's why I ran for president. Those are three reasons. And if she got elected, I'm 70 years old, that 8 years from now, our kids are going to be lost. And if she's president for 8 years, my chance to do
I
anything
have a
about
question.
it
If
would be
someone
gone.
comes in right now, can they see everything that I wrote
and
to
then
you? Yeah.
I got a contact from Callie Means.
Maybe.
Yes.
You've,
I don't know.
made one of
Talked
the
to her
best.
this morning.
one of
I
the
really
best
don't know.
shows, ever put on TV.
I really do not know.
Was your interview with Callie and his wife, Casey and Callie.
Oh, well.
For those of you who haven't
Guess it's
seen
time
the
to
show, his show is an expert.
I have to go now.
Genius, brilliant, articulate, eloquent, and incredible encyclopedic knowledge on the food system and what is corrupting it, what is causing the corruption at FDA. at
You know what? She's gonna wind
USDA
up like
that the
she's gonna wind
capture
up
of
at a
those
museum or
agencies by the
something
processed food industry, by the chemical industry,
when
by the
she's older.
pharmaceutical industry,
Yep.
that
She's
actually
gonna be like a
profit our sick
dinosaur
children. And one
expert
of
or
the things that
something.
Callie says, there is nothing more profitable in our
Working
society than being a
safaris or
sick
some
child,
shit in Africa.
because all of these entities are making money on them. The insurance companies, the hospitals, the medical cartel, the pharmaceutical companies have lifetime annuities. I mean, any child and the earlier that kid is sick, they don't want to kill them. They want them sick for the rest of their lives. And we have now a
Shut
whole
up,
generation. When my uncle was
right.
president,
I think I'm gonna
6%
call it,
of
folks.
Americans had chronic disease. Today it's
It's been a nice
60%.
stream.
When my uncle.
We'll pick up this conversation at a later date. But until next time, make sure you subscribe. Okay? We so close to 600. It's climbing a little bit each day. So, with that being said, subscribe to the channel. Consider hitting that like button, checking out some of the other videos and clips. I got hundreds. Okay, so check them out. Hit your boy up on Twitch. I stream Twitch regularly. I'm slacking lately, but we're gonna get that soon. Follow me on all the platforms except for TikTok. You know, welcome to TikTok, you know what I mean? If you know, you know. And until next time, peace.